Hello everyone, welcome to the QuesterMage and welcome back to another No Man's Sky video for the Nintendo Switch. In today's video I want to talk about skipping text in No Man's Sky when you're interacting with computer terminals. Why this happens, and how this could potentially be stopped by adding minigames. I'll be talking about why I think I skip these moments, how minigames would stop this, how they should be implemented, what practical differences they could make to the gameplay, and if this would improve the gameplay overall. So sit back, relax, click like, subscribe, and hopefully enjoy. Here we go. First, let me ask the question. Do you, the viewer/listener, do you skip a lot of lore or text in No Man's Sky? Let me know down in the comments. So why do I think I skip these moments? When exploring the universe in No Man's Sky, after a while, I find myself skipping a lot of text, especially when interacting with computer terminals in buildings. I usually don't like to skip text in other games unless there is a lot of repetition. I like to dive into the lore and generally try to be as immersed in the universe as possible. When I first played No Man's Sky, I read a lot of the lore, but then I just stopped. At the time, there was very little information on the game, and the in-game universe itself seemed fascinating to me. I wanted to explore everything, read everything. It seemed like the game was hinting that there was a bigger story at play, and all the text was weaving its way towards a bigger finale. There were times that it seemed the developers were being ambiguous on purpose, to tease future story beats, and there was a sense that if you kept playing, it would all potentially make sense later in the game. It kind of didn't. Worth mentioning is this was before the story missions were even a thing. Before, every time I'd see a building, I'd run to it, go inside, and just digest everything that the game was displaying to me. Now I tend to skip a lot of this text. So the question is, why am I skipping these now? I think this is due mainly to repetition and the overall thought that the lore doesn't really feed into an overarching story. But the biggest reason is what I consider to be weird placement for the text to be delivered to the player. Let me try to explain. When you eventually get to a computer, most of the time you're not there to digest the lore of the universe. The main goal of the player is to collect an item or to activate another function that the game has to offer. Therefore, when you're presented with a lot of text in between this, I think the player is more likely to just skip through that to get to their overall goal. The text placement to me seems like it's an obstacle in the way of a reward, and this is what makes me think that I'm skipping this text simply because it felt like it was just filler or just in the way. I am interested to hear from you, the viewer or listener. Do you feel the same? Again, I am someone with a lot of patience. I read a lot of stuff. I like all these universes and worlds in games. It seems like with No Man's Sky, that interest has waned. Do you skip text in these circumstances in No Man's Sky? If so, why do you think you skip the text? If you don't skip it, do you read it because it's there, or do you seek out lore in the game, or do you find it interesting? I think by simply moving the text to after the player has collected what they are seeking, it would potentially be more interesting, as the lore would now be presented as a reward. As an example, we can talk about the new salvage ships in the most recent Interceptor update. When you go through the process of finding a ship, you'll eventually be directed to an ancient site. The first time I'd done this, I read all the text and thought it was pretty interesting, and I think it's because it was being presented as a story moment or something of importance. Every other time, I just skip the same text, because now it's something I've read before, and now it's just in the way of getting what I want, now becoming an obstacle and not information that I find necessary. This is obviously due to the message being the same every time, as I mentioned, but there are other examples in the game that I will just skip through new lore just to get to an item. So how would minigames stop this, and how could they be implemented? I think this would need two things for it to be done. Number one, the repeating text should be kept to a minimum. Maybe one window of text and then give the player the reward or unlockable function that they are seeking. By condensing the amount of text, the player will be less prone to skipping future dialogue boxes and or lore delivery. Number two, why not add gameplay for these moments? The player is just clicking through the text, and I think by adding something like a minigame, this would keep the player interested. It gives us something to do. A minigame would be presented, the player would complete this, reward would be given, and then the lore would be displayed. This loop, I think, would be a little bit more effective in delivering a story beat. The player could have a sense that the text being delivered is a reward for completing a task and not just in the way. What practical difference would this make, and would it improve the gameplay? I think No Man's Sky would definitely benefit by having minigames added in various different moments of the game. This would add gameplay variety and generally give the player the feeling that they are interacting with the universe more. For this video, the focus was on lore and storytelling, so interacting with an ancient site in the future would involve something like deciphering text on a few pillars to activate it. In a factory, the player would have to align power connectors to the correct plugs, or interact with the screen and bring down the core temperatures of the machinery by reactivating the cooling system. This to me already sounds a bit more interesting than what we currently do, which is just read it. Another example would be those buildings that are surrounded by whispering eggs. Maybe you have to dissolve the gloop around the computer terminal itself. For No Man's Sky, this would potentially be even more interesting for me, as the minigames themselves could also be procedurally generated, so the minigames could potentially be different every time. The in-universe interactions right now boil down to basically talking to another character or getting in and out of something. Why not add minigames to give the player a feeling that they are doing something tangible in the worlds that they are exploring? If an idea like this would be implemented, maybe we would skip less text and in the process read more lore, which this game has quite a bit of, but I think is mostly skipped or ignored. Lastly, completing something is rewarding in games, we all know that, and it keeps the gameplay loop going forward. It gives us momentum by giving the player a sense of achievement. Once the player achieves something, they usually want a reward, and then they are primed to read some more lore, as they should be in a more content state after being rewarded. So right now the question would be, would I stop skipping text if minigames were added? Me myself, I think this would definitely help, especially coupled with less repetitive text. I really think that the monotony of seeing loads of text with little gameplay involved is the biggest issue for me. Minigames would be a way of breaking this up and actually making me feel that I am more involved with the mechanics of the gameplay and the interaction with the computer terminals in the game universe itself. The storytelling should be treasured by the player, but I think it also should be delivered in a more efficient manner, at least in my opinion. So what do you all think of text skipping and potentially minigames being added to No Man's Sky? Please let me know down in the comments. So that's going to do it for today's episode. Thank you very much again for watching. If you like what I do here, please click that like button down below. It helps out the channel a lot. If you want to see more, please click that subscribe button, as that is the only way this channel can grow. Now, I hope you liked this video, and I hope to see you in the next one. And until then, thanks again.